alive, how to take things, how to absorb things. The Maharal himself emphasizes this point of Shimush Talmidei Chachamim, of being of service, and that means watching the behavior of Talmidei Chachamim many, many times. So I believe that he wasn't self-taught, but there's no question. I'll give you, for example, my Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Libracha, one of my Rebbe's, Rabbi Azriel Goldfarb, went to his yeshiva. He was a student of Rabbi Mordechai Gifter. So I remember they said, I think at his levaya, at his funeral, that he considered himself to have two Rebbes. Who are his Rebbes? His one Rebbe was his alive Rebbe, that's Rabbi Mordechai Gifter. His other Rebbe was the Maharal. Because he used to learn a lot of Maharal, and he built a lot of his Torah ideology around the Maharal. But you still have to have that, you can't just learn from books, you have to have that live person. So I reject those that suggest that he was self-taught. He probably learned by his father. You know, in the old days there wasn't, by the way, there weren't big formalized yeshivot at that time. The first kind of big formalized yeshiva was in Volozhin, the great Volozhin yeshiva, which was much, much later. We're speaking about almost 200 years later that Chaim Volozhin established the yeshiva of Volozhin, much, much later in history. At these times they had a Beit Midrash, they had a house of learning, but they never had huge institutionalized yeshivot. Certainly not like was in Europe, and certainly not like we have today. Okay, now he got married, it's very interesting, at a relatively late age. We mentioned that Rabbi Nachman got married at 13. It wasn't so uncommon a couple of hundred years ago. Rabbi Nachman was the 18th century. 18th century he got married, and here we're speaking about the 16th century, and the Maharal only got married at 32. He got married to Peril, 28 years old, the daughter of Reb Shmuel ben Yaakov, who was a prominent person in Prague. Now, there is an interesting legend about his shidduch, and we're never 100% sure how accurate it is, but it's a very interesting legend about he got his shidduch. Now, the interesting thing is, why would he have gotten married so late?
That's what time it took him to find his beshert.
Okay, so maybe he never found, as they say today, he never found Mrs. Right until he was 32 years old. It's possible. Okay, I believe that a person of his, he was known to be a great Torah genius and he would have been in tremendous demand. And somehow I don't know, and this is just pure conjecture. I think it could be two other. I would like to suggest perhaps, again, no one knows, but perhaps two other reasons. One reason was that, first of all, for a great Torah scholar, there is a leniency under certain circumstances to delay getting married. That's why it says in Pirkei Avot, it says at 18 you're supposed to get married. Right? Even most yeshiva bochrim don't get married at 18. They first go learn. Because you're allowed to push it aside for learning Torah, and someone who's really steeped in Torah could push it till later. It was well known in Europe that the bochrim of the Miri yeshiva got married later than everybody else. That was well known. It was they learned for many years. That was how it was. Okay, so the Maharal could be because of that. But there perhaps was another reason. I'm not sure if that was the reason. I know most of his life he never had to work because his father was a successful merchant. So he was financially self-sufficient and self-supportive because of his, I guess, what he inherited from his father. But the Maharal is very strongly held for the opinion which we discussed a number of weeks ago of the Rambam. Remember? The Rambam that says that a person should not live off communal funds. That was the opinion of the Rambam, that a person needs to earn his own living. So perhaps he felt he couldn't afford it. The story, the legend that I'm going to tell you kind of indicates that a little bit. You see, the legend goes that his father, Reb Shmuel ben Yaakov, said to him, look, you'll get married to my daughter. Now, we're going to get married a couple of years later or whatever. You'll get married to my daughter, Peril. And they arranged it. And he was going to support him in learning for a number of years, I guess, before they got married. So the legend has it that the Maharal went to learn at the time by the Maharshal. The Maharshal, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, was a very, very great rabbinic sage, one of the greatest. He wrote books, the Yam Shel Shlomo, very, very well-known, great, great man. So some say the Maharal went to learn by the Maharshal, and he was supported by his father-in-law. Then what happened was his father-in-law to be went through troubled times. He wrote to the Maharal. He said, don't worry. He said, you're free to marry somebody else. So the Maharal turned around apparently and said, until your daughter gets married, I don't marry. She's not married, I don't marry. That's what he said. Anyway, that's how the legend has it. The legend has it that Peril opened a store to support her parents, and she was battling. She opened a bakery store. Legend had it that there was a man on horseback that one day came past her store with like a spear and pierced through the storefront and took a huge loaf of bread and rode off with it. And she ran after him saying, please, I beg you, I'm poor, we need money for my family. You cannot take it, you've got to pay me. And this particular rider on horseback said, listen, I'm sorry, I cannot. I have this garment of mine, this second-hand torn garment of mine. I'll give you that garment. I have no money. I cannot give you money. And gave her the garment. And he said, if I don't come back by this date, the garment's yours. He never came back. And she kept the garment, and she noticed that she cut open the garment, and it was filled with gold lining, gold fiber lining. And the family became a lot more wealthy from that gold. And they sent back to the Maharal, we're back in business, the shidduch is back on. Okay? That's how legend has it. Okay? Whether this is true or not, I have no clue, but it's a nice story nonetheless. It sounds like a Baba Maisa to me. Anyway.
I knew the answer was his Bashert.
Sorry?
I knew the answer was his Bashert.
Yeah, it was his Bashert. Anyway, that's the legend.
She was 28.
Yes.
The girl got married at an earlier age.
Correct.
For her to be 28, him 32 is one thing.
It's strange.
For her to be 28.
Yeah, it's strange. Joe mentions, one second, Rabotai. Joe mentions a good point. It's a little bit strange that she was 28. I don't know the answer to that. That is strange. That's more strange. Yeah, I never thought about that. It's a good point. I don't know.
No, because
She is 28.
her
Was
father
it
lost everything, so they did not have an
old
adult,
age?
so nobody wanted.
Maybe.
It was her Bashert.
Okay, let's continue. Okay, this is not the main point. It's just a cute side story. Now, the Maharal in 1553 was appointed the rabbi of Nikolsburg and the state of Mary. That was in 1553. He returned to Prague. He remained in his position for 20 years. He returned 20 years later in 1573 and opened a Beit Midrash in Prague. So he